Hello, Krishnan College. This is the big episode number 10. And today I have a very special guest, one of my best friends from North Penn High School. She is a double major at NYU studying economics and international relations in the pre-law track, and she has been able to make a huge impact on the communities that she has been involved in. And you guys are going to hear that throughout this interview. And I am super excited to welcome Kassandra Tran. Kassie, how's it going?
It's going well, Akshay. How are you?
Oh man, it's gonna be an awesome interview, so I'm excited. So I guess to get started, I'm just gonna leave the floor open to you. Just feel free to introduce yourself.
Okay, yeah. So as Akshay said, I am a rising junior at NYU undergrad. I'm double majoring in both economics, which is a one of the highly regarded programs at the school, as well as international relations. And I recently decided to, um, step into that pre-law track and become a lawyer post undergrad.
Cool. And I actually did not know that you were considering pre-law or I guess the declared pre-law. So congrats on that. So I guess when did that exactly happen and what was that decision like?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So I guess I'll go all the way back to elementary school. Um, I always enjoyed arguing. And then my parents, especially my mom, would always say to me, "You should be a lawyer, you should be a lawyer." And as a kid, you hear that from your parents and you kind of want to do the opposite. So I actually went into NYU as an econ and journalism major. But then after I studied abroad in Shanghai, I'll touch a little bit on that later. I did some journalism work over there and I realized that wasn't really the right track for me. And then I decided, you know what, maybe I'll give law a try because I know that I really want to have some sort of impact on like the public. Um, and that was a good route, especially going into law in the public sector. So I made that change. I realized my mom was right from the very beginning. And yeah, I switched to international relations.
Awesome. And I think it's really cool how you explain that change from an impact-driven perspective. I think
Yeah.
that that's a common thread that I'm sure that we see amongst our peers, who are going for these opportunities. So that is awesome. So you touched on this a little bit before, but let's backtrack to a few years ago when you were a student at North Penn. How did some of the opportunities through your experience at North Penn really help foster your interest in this field?
Well, first things first, I going into North Penn, I didn't really know what to expect. It was a large class. There were a lot of varieties of clubs and sports and other activities to join. But I kind of slowly found my way. I joined a few cultural clubs, but what really changed my whole perspective and I guess my career goals was the student ambassador program for I think it was proficiency and equity, a
Hmm.
cultural proficiency and equity. Essentially, that was a small cohort of students who are highly passionate about social justice issues. And we would every other week work with the school administrators to speak to them about policies or other issues that might be of concern to us as students, especially as people of color. Um, and, being a part of that group really opened my eyes to I guess how these issues that I once saw as small things were really a systemic problem. And then I realized then that I wanted to go into something that would actually make an impact, as you were talking about earlier.
Awesome. And I think that the evolution of that journey is really apparent in some of the things that I'm sure we'll touch on later. So
Yeah.
then I guess in terms of that really awesome opportunity, how were you able to effectively communicate that to a highly regarded institution such as NYU to kind of craft an effective application?
So I would say that program really opened me up. But then from there on out, when you're applying to like T20, T30 schools, you really have to take your own initiative. And so another thing that I did at North Penn was I worked with my close friend Lauren Yu, who now attends Vanderbilt University. I'd be happy to put you in contact with her if you'd like.
For sure. Sounds good.
Yeah. No, she and I worked together to create a multilingual program for families all across North Penn. So that includes the 13 elementary schools, the 3 middle schools, and of course the large high school. Because we noticed that there was this problem with particularly immigrant families who didn't necessarily speak English as well as second generation, third generation families have. Um, so we essentially created this program working alongside Dr. Hart, which was a very supportive school administrator at North Penn, to provide translation and interpretation services for different North Penn events.
Right. And I think that the combination of like all those activities probably really helped shape your perspective and it helped kind of drive your passions. So it's clear that you really took a lot of initiative, which is awesome. So I guess how did that experience of really taking initiative in high school, did you find that that kind of helped you do the same sort of thing in college? And I guess like how did those experiences compare and contrast?
That's a great question. So, going into college, especially one as selective, I'll say, as NYU, I kind of had this shock amongst my classmates where I realized that not only is everyone incredibly smart, but many people are very, very well accomplished and they've already been published authors in research projects, or they've studied abroad and done a separate internship there. And I just felt so behind, quite frankly. So it took me a while to gain that momentum back. I'd say I'm happy to say that I think I've started to get back on track of where I used to be in high school, but uh, in full transparency, it did take me some time. I think what really helped me, I guess, like gain that momentum again was going into a field that I actually enjoyed, because I think journalism, I was really pushing or trying to enjoy it, but then I finally realized that this wasn't the right track for me. But when I switched to law school, I was able to, or I guess it was easier for me to take initiative and gain leadership positions because I genuinely enjoyed what I was learning and doing.
Hmm. Right. And I guess to that point, was that shift there also academically? Like, was there a shock factor when you first came to college and got in that new setting of taking classes in that environment?
That's a great question. I think it really depends on the program. I was admitted into the liberal studies program, so I started off taking those classes, which would essentially replace gen ed courses for me.
Oh, got it.
Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
and they were very it was smooth sailing for me in the first year. I'll say that. But then by the second year, I started to take more courses related to my major, especially economics. And as I mentioned before, it's a very highly regarded major at the school. So I had yet another academic shock where I
Yeah.
realized that these were courses I genuinely needed to study for and take time to prepare. Um, I would definitely say there's this change there, but not necessarily from high school to my first year of college, but rather from my first year of college to my sophomore year of college.
Right. Like, and from my experience, I think that where that shift kind of occurs, I think it depends on your major and your school. Because I mean different programs will have different shock factors. So it's something that is kind of hard to prepare for as a high schooler.
Yeah.
But but like I guess once you realize that you were reaching that kind of difficult period in your academic career, what were some strategies that you used to really overcome that?
Biggest thing, and I would say this to any college student, no matter what your major is group studying.
Yeah,
I
I agree. Yep.
I am such a fan of group studying because in the past I rarely studied to begin with, but when I did, it would be by myself, and I'd find myself getting distracted or not understanding something and being in this like difficult block that I couldn't overcome. But when it came to forming a study group, just sitting down next to someone and asking for their number to see if they wanted to study in the future, that that was so beneficial in so many ways, because not only did it provide an extrinsic motivation for me to continue studying on my own so I can prepare for the group study sessions, but when we were studying together, I actually found myself looking forward to this because I knew I was doing it with people who, I guess you could say we were trauma bonding and
Yeah.
we were going through the same struggles. And but in other cases, sometimes I wouldn't understand something, but someone else would, and they would explain it to me, or vice versa.
Right. And as you briefly mentioned before, like you also studied abroad in NYU Shanghai.
Yes.
So how did your strategies have to kind of shift during that experience? Like, was it still similar or?
That's a great question as well. I would say, generally speaking, my study strategies didn't shift that much. I was primarily so I took two economics courses, one liberal studies course, and then one journalism course because I was still a journalism major back then. I would say that the journalism course and liberal studies were both relatively easy, given that it was a college environment. But in terms of
Right.
economics, I found myself really struggling because little did I know I registered for a class that I wasn't qualified to take because there was
Oh.
a prerequisite for it, but then I didn't have an advisor for NYU Shanghai. So
Mhm.
they just let me take the course and I went in blind essentially. Um, that was when I began to pick up on using external tools, like technological tools. The class wasn't traditionally structured. There was no midterm or final exam, but rather a semester long research project that we had to go on
Oh,
to work
interesting.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was more similar to like a capstone, I guess you could say.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
We would have to give presentations every once in a while, and then there was an oral exam for the midterm, and then a final presentation for the final, of course. But I really started to rely on AI to
Hmm.
study and get context for what we were learning because, like I said, I wasn't qualified to take the course. And in a class like this where there aren't actual formal exams, there's no, I mean, might as well use your resources when you can, right? Because
Definitely. Yeah.
like there's no academic morals or I guess like no academic code of contact that I would be crossing there, I
Yeah,
guess.
you're not violating academic integrity by
Correct.
utilizing your resources. And I think that at any program for college that you attend, there are usually pretty defined rules. And if you can't find them, then I'm sure that your professor would be more than willing to answer any questions. I think in that regard, it's from my experience, like it's been a few years, but compared to high school, I think that college is much more open to that form of learning, and they're more open to using it as a tool for planning and optimizing your schedule. So I think it's like really insightful like that you brought that up.
In fact, my professor encouraged us to use AI
Yeah.
whenever we didn't understand a concept.
Yeah, and that's a tool that's going to be present in the working force no matter what field you go into.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. So don't work against it, just learn how to use it for your own benefit.
yes, yes, I think that's like a really succinct way to put it. So then I guess like just going back to that study abroad experience because like so I've yet to study abroad. Fingers crossed, hopefully I get to travel slash study abroad. But what really prompted your decision to go to Shanghai?
My family was definitely the number one thing. I everything I do in my life is essentially for my family in one sense or another. And my grandparents live in Hong Kong and I only get to see them I think once a year if
Yep.
that. There was a long period of time during COVID where I hadn't seen them for 4 years, but um, because of that, I really wanted to get as close as possible to them because they essentially raised me for a few years in my life when I was a young child. And my grandmother is from Shanghai. So there were like two things, right? There's the proximity being closer to my grandparents, but also getting in touch with my cultural heritage and learning more closely about my roots because of course I'd grown up in a Chinese Vietnamese household. I'd been in touch with my culture, but specifically being in Shanghai put me in touch with my grandmother's culture. So
Yeah, I think that that is a really awesome reason to study abroad. And thanks for sharing that. So like I guess like to kind of go back like to that message, what was one thing that really surprised you professionally and then one thing that really surprised you personally, like from that experience?
Ooh, okay, I'll start with the professionally. Like I said, I was journalism major when I studied abroad. I did some journalism work. I worked two part-time jobs while
Oh
being
wow, busy.
a student, student athlete, so there's that as well. I really packed my schedule in there because I wanted to max out my experience, but both of those, one job was more related to TV production. That was just for my own personal interest, but the second one was um, a marketing writer, but it was structured as kind of like a journalism role, I guess you could say. I was given my own I was assigned my own articles to write at my own pace, and I was basically in charge of myself, almost like a freelance writer who had to report
Cool.
to my supervisor every once in a while. And I actually, the idea of being a freelance writer, being your own boss sounds nice, but for me personally, I realized that I didn't enjoy the schedule because there was a lack of schedule, if that makes any sense. I
Yeah.
felt that at times my writing assignments that were supposedly fun and exploratory were really just another assignment for me to have to work on. And it
Hmm.
just felt like more homework, and I wasn't necessarily fun because I was getting paid by the hour, but at the same time, I just get paid by as fast as I can finish the article. So there was a little bit of like a gray area there in terms of like payment as well. And I
Hmm.
just felt that I've learned that I really value stability and having a set routine, like a 9 to 5, for example. Um,
Right.
so that's when I made the change and realized that journalism wasn't for me. In terms of personal experiences and learning, I would I guess the biggest takeaway that I got from studying around Shanghai was definitely picking up the language Mandarin
Yes.
because I had grown up speaking English and Cantonese to my family, but and Cantonese, for those of you who don't know, is spoken in Guangdong, China, which is southern China, as well as Hong Kong. So there's not a large population of people who speak it, um, but in almost all of China, everyone can speak Mandarin, which is, in other words, it's called 普通话, which is translates to normal language, common language.
Hmm.
Um, so picking that up was very, very useful for me. I had already had some sort of an understanding with it because every time I FaceTime my grandparents in Hong Kong, they speak several languages, way more than I
Wow.
can. Um, I won't get into that, but they would always speak Mandarin to me as opposed to Cantonese, so I
Right.
was able to develop that comprehension, which when I came to Shanghai, I found that really useful for me to pick up the language more quickly. Um, just a really quick background on the difference between Cantonese and Mandarin. I already covered the geographical differences, but when you let's just say if someone doesn't know Mandarin but they speak Cantonese, it's similar enough for them to pick it up and learn it relatively quickly. But if they have never had a formal education or never attempted to try learning the language, then they would have no idea what someone would be saying in Mandarin, essentially. Um, so it's like similar but different at the same time. I was fortunate enough to grow up with a Cantonese background already and then have my grandparents give me that Mandarin comprehension. So then when I went to live in Shanghai, I definitely found myself speaking the language more. I was being forced to use it. And when I was at the mall or going grocery shopping,
Yep.
and even speaking amongst my teammates on the basketball team or my coach. I'll get into that as well. She did not speak English,
Yeah.
but
Oh,
yes.
like I like definitely want to talk about the fact
Yeah.
that you were the captain of the women's
Oh,
basketball team in
yes.
Shanghai. So
Yes, yes.
that experience just sounds like super like that sounds super unique and awesome because I remember back in high school like you always liked the sport but like you never really played it in a professional kind of
Yeah.
way. So I
Yeah,
guess what was that shift like? And like I just want to hear all about that. That's just interesting.
that's wonderful. I would love to talk about it. I'd been on basketball teams outside of school since second grade up until eighth grade when COVID hit.
Hmm.
I joined the middle school team then on varsity, but after COVID, we kind of just cut it short. Um, and then post COVID, it was like a slow transition for me, and I didn't join the basketball team at high school because I was too focused on getting into college and taking as many AP classes as I could.
Yeah,
By college, I realized that I wanted to open up more and like, regain the hobbies that I had once had. So then I realized when I was preparing to study abroad in Shanghai, I checked the website, I saw that they had a basketball team, and I realized that they allowed study away students, even who are even there for one semester, to try out. So I
that's
thought
awesome.
this is my redemption arc. I can finally go back and relive my once amazing memories. So yeah, I went in, I tried out. As I was trying out, I realized that the coach did not speak any English. They had to have an interpreter for her because there were a handful of American kids, no more than five, trying out, and then a lot of Mongolians as well, who,
Oh, got it.
they only spoke Mongolian and English, which is impressive enough. But yeah, there was definitely a language barrier there.
Mhm.
And then post tryouts, I heard the coach say something to say my name and then say a noun after, but I didn't know what it meant. And then all of a sudden, all of my Chinese teammates started congratulating me. And I look around and I'm like, what did she say? And they said that she named you captain. And I was like, this is
Oh,
amazing. But I
whoa,
think,
that sounds like it's out of a movie or something.
oh my gosh, it was great. I It was definitely very memorable, and I think it's a little bit of a funny story because of the fact that I couldn't understand her telling me what my role was on the team. Um, and that was definitely a challenge as we began to practice, but I I I adapted to it as one always has to, not only as a student but as an athlete. And I picked up on the language. I learned offense, defense, pass, dribble, shoot, the
Yeah,
classic basketball
yeah,
terms. And then I found myself being the translator at the practices.
awesome.
Yeah, so it was me and a few other girls whose Mandarin was worlds better than mine, but whose
Yeah.
English maybe not so much. So we would
Mhm.
find ourselves taking turns, and it was a really interesting obstacle that we had to overcome that I'd never encountered before, being only on an American team in the past. So I really enjoyed that experience. I learned a lot from it, and I learned a lot of Mandarin as well.
Yeah, well, that sounds like awesome. That sounds like it really gave you some interesting insights that like I'm sure that you can apply to a variety of
Yes.
settings because I mean like not everybody speaks English and I mean growing up in a suburban Pennsylvania high school, it's like most of the people can really speak English. So then when you go to another environment, there is definitely a change. And I think it's really cool the way that you describe like being able to find a system to communicate because I think that that can go across whatever you're studying in college. And I think that's a really nice intangible skill that you have. So awesome.
Thank you.
So then I guess moving past your study abroad experience and and coming to some of your like work and research experience and kind of building your path in the public sector. Like you had an opportunity to work at the Woori Center and you got to work as aside an immigration attorney during ICE policy developments. Now, to me, like that sounds pretty intense. So what did it feel like really just being in the room during that?
Um, it was a sensitive time. I think I'm not allowed to disclose too much information
Right,
regarding
definitely,
working with
definitely.
immigration attorney, but I guess I'll just say that I provided interpretation services for her client who couldn't speak English very well but spoke Spanish natively.
Got
Um,
it.
and I used my Spanish proficiency from high school. I tried my best to translate, but I guess just being face to face with people who are dealing with the who you know who really have to reconsider their safety, even if they're just going out to work, and
Mhm.
living their daily lives it changed my perspective for sure um, on America and the current administration's policies because I think to a lot of people who sit from I guess a further chair and a more privileged position, it's easy for them to say, "Oh yeah, this is a big issue and we can't really do anything about it though because it's the administration." When I worked for this nonprofit, I realized that that in fact wasn't true, and we could make a difference, whether however small, even if it's just one person's livelihood. That is their whole life. You know,
Right.
it's everything to them. And even though Woori Center is a small organization, we were able to make a relatively significant community impact. I'd like to think,
That's
and it was a very meaningful experience, not just for my resume, but for
right.
my personal morals.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool how you emphasize that there's so much that experience behind the resume. I feel like oftentimes during high school and college, students can often just get caught up on doing things to fill up their resume. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that like so far in our conversation, everything that you've done has seemed to be really just motivated by like a passion or something beyond just for the sake of doing it for your career. So I think that that's really awesome. And like it's something that we'll continue to hear about. So, so I guess like another thing that people are interested in getting involved in oftentimes is research of any kind. So, how has that looked for you so far in the more like liberal arts economic space?
Um, Quite frankly, I haven't done much research. Like I said, I did a semester long research project in Shanghai. Uh,
Hmm.
that was primarily focused on like comparing the two financial systems of the US and China, looking
Hmm.
into monetary and fiscal policy and
Hmm.
how their tools evolved over time post or pre 2008 financial crisis and post financial crisis.
Hmm.
Um, I this semester I worked alongside a PhD candidate at Rowan University, and her project was essentially on student voice and looking into how um, different researchers define student voice differently. In some cases, they use student voice more of as a buzzword just to, I guess, make their project seem a little bit more significant and inclusive of students, when in reality they simply have student participants in their study, while whereas other researchers use student voice and truly make it the center of their work. So I guess like looking into that discrepancy there and then trying to define where exactly we should draw the line between student voice or student participant. Um, I think that's about all the research I've done. I've more so been working on internships or just focusing on getting a
Right.
high GPA for law school. But yeah.
Well, I mean, even like well you express it as kind of not that much, but that sounds like significant, and it seems like you've definitely been able to take some cool things out of it. But I definitely want to touch on your internship experience as well. So so I know that you have a great internship this summer. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yes. So, Woori Center primarily focused on helping immigrant communities, and then I kind of continued that forward this summer, where I will be working at the Montgomery County Commissioner's Office, which,
Awesome. Yeah.
for those of you who don't know, the Commissioner's Office is essentially like a group of mayors for multiple municipalities. Montgomery County, I believe, is one of the, I think might be the second largest county in Pennsylvania. I'm not entirely sure. We could fact check that, but
Yeah.
but I'm working under Nellie Jimenez, who is the Director of Immigrant Affairs at the Commissioner's Office. And I'm only about 1.5 weeks in, but she has taught me so much already. I can tell truly how passionate she is about her work, and she herself is a lawyer. She went to law school in Venezuela, where she's originally from. But I mean, there's so much to say. My first day, I introduced myself to her, and then we went to a woman's house to interview her for a photojournalism project. The next day, I was in court observing a sentence where a man had committed an aggravated assault. There's so much to say about it, and at the same time, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say because it is for the
Right,
government
right.
after all.
Uh,
Um, I guess just to be safe, I'll end conclude by saying that I've learned a lot, and I've had a lot of takeaways, not just from the legal perspective, but on a personal, more intimate level, dealing with immigrant communities. And I'm really excited to see what we continue doing.
sure, and that sounds like you got to experience like a lot of different things just from those two experiences
Yeah.
that you described. So we'll have to catch up when your summer's done too to hear more about it. So I guess that we're nearing the end of our time on this episode. So, like, it's one of the concluding questions that I like to ask. Like, what does a successful career look like to you in about like 10 to 15 years?
Great question. So, post law school, I'm looking into being a corporate lawyer, specifically business law, because I have a background in economics, and I figured might as well use my undergraduate degree in addition to having a JD. Um, of course, there's always the financial incentive to work in corporate law, but seriously speaking, the tuition for law school is very, very high. So I'm hoping to get a good job post law school. And then that I guess that would be around like 5 to 10 years after my academic studies conclude. But following that, I hope to work in the public sector, which is why I'm really interested in law in the first place. You know, after relieving all my student debt, which I'm not excited to take on, I hope to make a true like meaningful impact. Specifically, work for the government, maybe do something along the lines of what my supervisor Nellie is doing right now, or on a larger scale, maybe for the state or national level. I definitely know that I want to work in the public sector as a lawyer, solicitor, attorney in some form or another, but I think that would have to be another 15 years from now. I'm excited to see what comes.
That sounds awesome and it sounds very exciting. So definitely looking forward to seeing what you do. And yeah, I guess like another question that came up, like I guess from a lot of students that I've talked to, is there's kind of a hesitancy to apply to these like T20 schools, like kind of like an imposter syndrome of like, or maybe kind of counting yourself out. What advice do you have to that student to just take the step and apply?
Speaking of imposter syndrome, I think that is very real, and it's not something that can be, I guess, like joked about.
Hmm.
Um, I I guess I had a similar sentiment when I was applying to college as well. I had applied ED1 to Penn, and when I realized I got rejected, that was a hard hit to my ego. I felt like a lot of my hard work hadn't paid off. But
Hmm.
I decided to take another leap and apply to NYU because, quite frankly, when else will you be given an opportunity to choose where you will be living for the next 4 years? I mean, this is a big decision, and I understand that a lot of students may feel pressure in making it. But I guess my advice to those kids would be to just believe in yourself. If you've worked hard and you know you've worked hard, then you truly have to know your own academic self-worth and take the leap and apply, because even if they reject you like Penn rejected me, you might end up in a place that gives you even more fulfillment than you thought the previous school would have, right? So I'll say that I'm very glad I chose NYU. I had a few other schools that I might have gone to, but I could now, being 2 years in, I couldn't think of another school that I'd rather be at. Um, so just believe in yourself. Don't be afraid, because rejection, quite frankly, is just, it happens all the time. It happens to everyone. And if you get rejected, that just proves that you weren't afraid to try. So Go for it.
All right, you heard it here, folks. Cassie Tran says go for it. So thank you so much for your insights, Cassie. This has been a really interesting conversation, and I hope that like people can take something away from it. So I really appreciate your time today. And this is Akshay Krishnan signing off on Krishnan College episode 10. Bye bye.
Bye.